Hi, I'm Chris Brown, and this is the ClosePoint Cafe. And today we have two dynamic leaders in the real estate world, specifically in the South Jersey market, that are going to speak with us today about the upcoming changes, their leadership style in the industry, what's making them successful, and how they're coping with all the different changes that are taking place within the real estate industry as a result of the NAR settlements that have taken place throughout the country. Today we have with us Deanna Faye-Brown from Connection Realtors and Mr. Mark McKenna of Pat Mckenna Realtors. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys and delve into all the different aspects of what is making you guys, force you guys to change the way you're doing business and how you started, in the industry, you coming from a RE/MAX side, you coming from as an independent for 42, 43 years. Let's talk about that, how you guys got your start and, where you've grown to and what you look like today. So, Deanna, why don't you go first?
Sure. So for me, professionally, I have about 10 years of banking experience, and then you and I started working together in title and in real estate. It's been a little over 20 years. Probably about 15, 16 years in there were as franchise owners of another brokerage. And then we made a decision about 3.5 years ago that there were some pain points, right? Some things on our back that we needed solutions for. And we wanted solutions for our agents too. That sort of the traditional, maybe antiquated model wasn't serving all their needs, just like it wasn't serving ours as owners. And so we made the move to EXP. It's been about 3.5 years. And in that moment, so many of our problems were solved. So many opportunities and doors were open for our agents. And we've continued to see that emphasized over the course of the last several years.
Awesome. Mark? Your story is a little bit different.
Well, it's funny you say that. It is, but there's a lot of similarities in some of the things that you just said there. So we were independent for 43 years. I was handing out flyers and putting out signs since I was 11. I got my real estate license when I was 18. I started working full-time in 1991 in the brokerage. My father started it with my mother. My mother still works with me today after 46 years. And when we were independent, we had anywhere from 12 to 16 agents, and now our team consists of 95 agents. We have a second location and soon to be a third location. One of the things that listening to Deanna speak was, there was some holes in where we were at. Like our model was broken. 16 agents grinding, working hard. The key person goes down, you're out of business. Okay? So, and we wanted to build something special that was duplicatable each month, and that's what we're doing in the real estate industry. I always had always had a team, since the early 90s, and building that team and knowing what agents need. I said, all right, let's do something where we can take all the expenses out of this for the agent, provide them with business, coach them up, and so we're like, it's one just big team at our business. But the key thing is we have this big corporate S&P 500 monster behind us, but we're a family business, and I think that it shows in how we treat everybody.
That's incredibly true. I've seen that in other parts of the business where, you do have this big, conglomerate behind you, but yet you're bringing localized resources. Right. You're using them as your framework, I suppose, as to deliver a certain segment of, support to your agents. Mm-hmm. But yet there's you and your team delivering, the ground. It's like the rubber meets the road type of thing. That's where you guys come in and fill that gap. You can have this cloud, then the rubber meets the road, and that's you guys, and that's the grind. So it's a credible story for both of you because you made big changes coming from different situations. Mm-hmm. You just said 12 to 16 agents back 3 years ago?
Correct.
95 now.
Correct.
What allowed you to go from 16 agents to 95 agents?
Well, probably the biggest thing is the platform for EXP takes so much work off our back plate. I look what I paid EXP last year. I think it was like $22,000. That was the best $22,000 I've ever spent because it allows me to go out. If you want to sell more, you sell more. If you want to build your team, you work on building your team more. If you want to work on systems, you do that. Because E&O insurance and commission checks and files and problems with, your back office, it's done. It's seamless. Just happens. And my agents are on cloud nine. They're, oh, my check hit already. The money's not even there, and they already got paid.
Same day payment.
That's wonderful.
Incredible.
They love that.
That is a pretty amazing benefit.
The new agents who come over from another broker's like, I already got my check. I'm like, yeah, I told you that's how it works. Okay, right? I mean, it takes all that nonsense off your back. And the other resources like eXp World answers a ton of questions. The rooms that we have, if you go in these different rooms, they answer. Everybody's so helpful and answers the questions like in 2 seconds, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. And like I said before, the doors that open for our agents, just being able to, if they choose to, go beyond production, if they want to pour into mentorship, if they want to leverage certifications, if they want to become a referral king or queen across the country or even around the world, eXp has an entire framework for that it doesn't have to funnel through one individual owner, one individual
Correct.
team leader to be the master of the circus. You have this amazing plug and play opportunity for the agent, for them to go in so many more directions than they ever saw possible in our old model. It's amazing.
So currently, with all the changes that are taking place with NAR, tell me how your leadership style, and tell our audience, is impacting your agents, and what proactive steps has, one, eXp have done, and two, what have you guys done to support your agents, and how important is that in this time frame?
So let me start off by saying one thing. If we were still independent and I had to live through these changes, I don't think we would have made it. I just don't think we would have been so uninformed. And I say this all the time. My mother and I, we kind of butt heads sometimes about the process. I said, I couldn't be more happy with what our leadership at eXp has done. They are so far out in front of everybody. And now my agents can see this because we've been training them based on what the direction that eXp has taken us. And they see every minute, are like, you guys were well. I said, it wasn't me, it was our leadership, okay? Because we believe in what they do. We have all our listing forms, we have all the everything that the New Jersey Real Estate Commission, NAR, wants us to have. We have our own versions, and they're much better than everybody. All the consumer watchdog groups love what eXp has put out there for us. So I couldn't feel any better about what they've done for it. It's amazing, and it's helped our agents understand and get their arms around it. Now, is everybody 100%? Absolutely not. I would be lying if I said that. But we are well more informed than everybody else out there right now. I hear some really scary comments.
Absolutely. This has been, for me personally, this experience, these last few months have been the exclamation point on our transition to eXp. If I wasn't feeling the validation over the last 3 years, seeing the way that leadership has handled and gotten in front of this transition for the agents with forms, with scripts, with dialogue, with the overall feeling of let's prepare our people, let's support our people, and let's, at the end of the day, do even better for the consumer. When you can get on board with that message as an agent, I've talked to so many agents in other models that they're not even having conversations. They don't even know what to do right now. They're desperate. And I just had an agent the other day. She said, I just sat in on an inspection today, and I completely educated the other agent on everything that you just went over at our team meeting. Wow. She said, and it's amazing. They sat there just dumbfounded, eyes glazed over, not getting any of this from their own leadership. So this has been the absolute exclamation point. We are here in the right place, leading the way on how these changes will be adopted to be better for the consumer, and at the end of the day, better for the consumer-agent relationship.
So let's talk about the consumer standpoint on this. we talk about how it impacts agents, right? But we service all of us in my industry and your industry, consumers. That's the end game, making sure they're happy. How are these changes going to impact the consumer? What does a consumer have to do to work through these changes? What if you were to speak to me as a buyer and I want to go see a house? Tell me what I got to do to go see that house, because that has changed.
So we're actually taking an approach that when you get a buyer, it's more like you're signing a house up. You're getting a listing. Because when you go list a house, you sit and you meet with the sellers and you give me your pitch and you tell them what you're going to do. It's going to be the same thing with the buyer. Now, everybody rushes to go see a house. Oh, I want to see this house. You got to slow the process down a little bit. You have to have a lot more buyer consultations. You'll sit down. You'll show the consumer how the whole thing is going to play out. And it's good for them to see what actually you do. They think you just open a door and go in and that's it. That's not the case. Your agent has to break down everything they're doing, make them feel comfortable, let them know the different scenarios that can arise, and you set expectations. It's the same thing on the listing side. I mean, I can't say enough. This is what you can expect. This is what's going to happen. Percentage-wise, this is how many people are going to be offering concessions. You break all that down for you. What it's going to do, it's going to make sure the real professionals are going to do well. There's going to be a fallout in this business, and there needs to be. And the people who are trained right, who take this job serious, are going to do very, very well. All right? And that's the kind of people that we want on our team.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. I think at the end of the day, these changes afford the consumer greater transparency, better understanding of the process, and more power and authority to own the negotiation process with the opposite party. So a seller negotiating with a buyer negotiating with a seller. And I couldn't emphasize more what you're saying, Mark, that reputation of the agent, trustworthiness of the agent, and relationship between agent and client is more important than ever. It can't just be about instant gratification. I'll work with one agent Monday morning and a different one Monday afternoon because I want to see two different properties. The relationship matters. Affording yourself as a buyer or seller the best possible protection, negotiation support, and sort of muscle through the transaction. You want to align yourself with the right professional. And those who aren't committed to this will flush out.
And that leads me to my next question is, what do you think the fallout's going to be in the number of agents that are actually going to stay in the business?
Well, I think we lose 25 to 30%, if not more. I mean, if you look at the numbers...
And that's because of why?
It's because people are afraid to ask questions. Nobody likes change, okay? And to be a great salesperson, you have to ask important questions. That's why 70% of all the agents last year in Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester County sold less than 5 houses.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Okay, so you think about if you take 70% sold less than 5 houses, right? They're afraid to ask a question. They're just working with a family member or whatever it may be. But that fall off is going to be big because we talked about this earlier. The Bright is going to audit listing agreements, buyer's agency. You got to have all your ducks in a row. This isn't something that you can just, fly by the seat of your pants and do. So all those people who don't take this job serious as a 7-day-a-week job, because that's what it is, all right, the fallout's going to be big. And then you have a lot of people who, in this business, who just keep their license and they're at the end of their career. They don't like to deal with the technology. They're going to fade out pretty quickly too. So I think that is going to help the professionals, because when all that fallout occurs, that will mean a lot more business for the people who are here every day. The only thing I am concerned about, if that business becomes too overwhelming for the people who are left, I think the customer service could drop off a little bit. That's my big concern.
Or the converse could happen until it gets caught up, that the newer agent is actually trained.
That's a great point.
To
the right way,
fill that gap and get to the new normal. Of do you think that's going to be a barrier of entry? Because hey, you got your license and you went through the 75-hour course and you did all the things that are necessary to get your license, but there's another level of training that has to occur for you to even think about getting into this business. So talk about that. I mean, do you think the barrier of entry For those newer agents, is it going to make it insurmountable for them to come through, or is it going to be just the new normal? And they'll fill the gap of the 25% that you see dropping out and then being filled up with the new agent.
Well, I think it'll be the new normal. And I'll tell you, I've had some funny situations. I've had some agents who don't have a lot of experience. I had one, she picked up a buyer in an open house and went over everything. She got a buyer agency contract signed with them at the open house, and it was $1 million buyer, okay? Brand new agent. Some of my more experienced agents would struggle with that process because, yeah. So she's like, hey, I just want to let you know, she followed the plan. Asked the questions, they signed the agency contract.
So that plan that she followed, was that you and your leadership style?
Correct.
And all the sales meetings? And because I know you personally, and I've known you for 20-something years. I see your car out in front of your office when I go home until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. How many hours are you guys putting into training your agents? I know this is kind of low, to get them up to speed on all the changes, and then get them to understand it from a practical standpoint so they can apply it. So talk about what has going on into this for how many months now?
Well, I think certainly getting the direction that we've gotten from the brokerage has been key. So we're sort of taking that wave and riding it through, making sure that the information is making its way to our agents and to our support staff as well. That's really important. That's where I'm spending a lot of time too, is just helping. Let's talk through what worries you, what gives you anxiety, because if we talk about it here and work that out here, you're going to feel more confident going into those conversations with your clients. I think a really important point too, just even in reference to, seeing agents leave the business, I think a huge part of that is going to be consumer education. Yeah. That, in the moment right now, you have seasoned agents who say, Deanna, what happens if I don't, if the buyer passes on me, right? The buyer doesn't want to sign an agency agreement and they'll just go on to the next one. Now I'm competing with the next person who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in the short term, that's going to feel painful because there will be those agents.
Correct.
But in the long term, the answer is, what consumer wants to work with an agent who's willing to put their license in jeopardy, who's willing to put their brokerage in jeopardy by not following the rules? And these are state rules. These aren't individual agent or brokerage rules. And these are national rules, right?
And if I know anything about the state and the way they operate, they're just dying to make an example of somebody.
Oh, yeah, God, yes.
You know that as well as I do.
Oh, it's a great...
I've had agents, even just this weekend, say, I had a vibe at my open house. I got a phone call that seems a little bit, I said, well, you need to anticipate that there will be watchdogs out there making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
So how many hours and how many months have you been putting into getting your agents up to speed and into a situation to have that open house and understand their requirements?
Listen, I put a lot of time in, but listen, I'm not tracking hours because that's not what it's about. In my mind, this is about, I want to provide the same local personal example to my team and to the staff that we're bringing in to support these agents in the way that my brokerage leadership has been there for me. It's my job to help navigate this, to minimize the anxiety, the worry, and the concern, and help agents recognize the opportunity and the value of an exceptional agent moving through these changes. So I'm not logging the hours.
But you're logging.
But the other thing that I want to say too that I absolutely love is that maybe in the past, yes, we've known each other a long time, but if we wanted to compare notes on what we were doing, it was sort of a quiet phone call. Hey, Mark, hey, Deanna. Now it's, let's be out in the open. Let's bring our teams together. Let's talk about what you're doing that's successful. Exactly. What am I doing that's successful? And how can we together, 1 + 1 = 3, which is another huge component of this. So yes, I'm logging a lot of hours, so is he, but there's also this whole other pool of leverage that we never had before. Locally, personally, it's fantastic.
And I think that's a great point. As far as your hours, a lot. Yeah. When my wife tells me I need to go away on vacation,
I know your wife well.
That she knows, she's like, you're high strung right now. So one of the things that it's constant that you have to do very well right now is make sure when those calls come in, you got to help those agents because they're struggling. So I might get an extra 10, 15 phone calls a day. Hey, work through this. How do I do this? What are we doing? Our office, we communicate through Slack. So there'll be some questions. They all wait for me to answer the question. Right. So it's done right and it's very precise. But, because when you have a training class, there's no test at the end. There's no baseline what everybody absorbed. They're all going like this, okay? So, and then you'll figure it out. You can kind of tell from the room who's got the real glazed over look, who's going to need a little bit more help. And I might pull them aside and I'll say, hey, work with Carly or work with this person. Gotcha. But, your role's changing. Like I've always been salesperson. Now I'm more of an educator and a trainer, helping them succeed through this difficult time. More importantly, and I think we've talked about this before, we're not only helping our agents at EXP, the whole industry is calling us for help. I mean, you're talking about top tier agents, $40, $50 million producers, deer in the headlights. Really? I'm like, okay.
And you're looking at your phone like,
I'm like, am I really having this conversation? Right?
Wow.
One guy was a very good friend of mine, and I said to him, I go, listen, I'll help you no matter what. Like you're like my brother. I go, shame on your brokerage. That's all I can tell you. I said, I'll help you. Any question you ever have, but that's their job. That's why you pay them.
So let's change gears here a little bit. Let's talk about the end of the process, end of the closing, where ClosePoint's involved. We're preparing our closing documents. Tell me the different scenarios that will come out of what the settlement statement will look like. It doesn't have to be, I know it's not a one size fits all, and I get that, and everything's negotiable between the buyer and the listing agent and the seller, rather. What is the possible outcomes from concessions to, commissions being paid, things of that nature? But, that's going to dictate how you negotiate the deal. So from my industry standpoint, what should we be prepared for? I have an idea, but I'd rather...
Crazy commission statements? How's that?
Seriously.
I mean, I think you're going to see that. Like, we talked about this. If you have a buyer paying some buyer agency concessions, you're going to have you might have multiple commission statements in the same office. Buyer's paying this, seller's paying this. It'll be a little convoluted. It's usually what we don't see. It's something different.
So are you saying that a buyer's agent could get paid in part by the buyer?
Correct.
And then in part by the seller?
That is correct. So now when these rules came apart and that amendment on August 1st that the legislation played, in a disclosed agency, the buyer and the seller can now pay compensation to both sides. Okay, so you might see, I might have the listing, Jim from my office might have the buyer, and that buyer might pay Jim directly on the sheet, and my seller pays me. It could happen. We've never seen that before. Okay, so these are all new things we're going to work through. As we were talking about before, what's the lender's play? What's their role in this? Okay, how do they look at a concession compared to a commission? So there's going to be a big learning curve on our side. You asked me what's it going to look like. I haven't seen one yet. Okay,
yeah, that's a great answer.
I'll tell you in mid-September.
So you'll come back and we'll talk about the results of what we've seen so far.
But I think that's the one thing. I think agents are going to and our TCs are going to have to be a lot more detailed on commission letters, sending them in so there's no problems at closing. I think loan officers are going to have to put that on their GFE if there's,
Sure.
There's going to be a couple things that we're going to have to really make sure it's detailed, because if it's not on their GFE, if they're paying some money, then 3 days before
it's not compliant.
We got a problem.
Right.
So, and again, when we have the cream of the crop that's going to rise, they're going to be detail oriented, okay? And they're going to hit all these buttons. We have checklists. We talk about what we look at, okay? Make sure you have that great lender that you have a relationship with that's thinking on the same page as you do. If you have a lender that you've never worked with, build a rapport. Go over what needs to be done, okay? So it doesn't bite you in the ass, because that's your last reflection. If you missed your settlement date because you weren't on the same page with that lender, there goes 3 or 4 referrals for you as an agent.
Yeah. And even more importantly, bringing the lender in at the very beginning of the process, because now with the possibility of buyer absorbing commission as a closing cost, you don't want to be putting offers forward to a seller that your lender can't underwrite. That's a huge concern, right? So you can't rely on a pre-approval letter in and of itself and then bring the lender in once you get to contract. They need to be helping you through the process from one offer to the next.
So does that require your offices to offer to the lender your buyer's agency agreement so they can qualify them?
Well, I think it's going to really require for us to highlight things when we send,
Like a worst case scenario.
when we send a loan officer a copy of the agreements. Okay, your email needs to be real. Hey, please check out paragraph, whatever it may be. Notice that there's some concessions being paid by the buyer themselves, so you know that, instead of just sending it out and just, hey, here's a copy of it. Because most people don't read anything. Okay, you send it to a DocuSign. I didn't read it. Okay, I didn't see. You need to take your time. Look, please read this in bold letters so they know you're on the same page. And that's going to be something that they're going to have to get used to.
And that's a very important point for agents that are listening, that if you have a buyer's agency agreement, if you're working with a buyer, the lender, you should expect the lender to ask for that agreement as part of their underwriting process. But at the same time, if you're a buyer's agent, that's your contract with the buyer. If you're a listing agent, the listing agreement is your contract with the seller, and those are private and confidential to you and the client that you're working for. You should never be a buyer's agent having to share your buyer agency agreement with a listing agent, or vice versa.
Interesting. And that's the big difference between all this that took place.
Correct. I mean,
Listing agents are not going to negotiate a compensation for a buyer agent anymore.
Every offer that's submitted by a buyer's agent, is up for negotiation. That's the whole, I mean, if you think about the whole gist of the lawsuit, right? So they just want the seller to have the ability to say, I don't want to pay anything, or I'm going to negotiate on every offer comes in. There's no set dollar amount. There's never been a set dollar amount, but people would put a percentage in all the time. Might have been 2, might have been 2.5, might have been 3, could have been 4, right? So now when it comes in, exactly, right? So now when the offer comes in, that seller has the ability to negotiate. Now what are they going to do? They're going to say, what do you think? That's what they're going to say. That's why
they hired you.
That's exactly right, okay? And you're going to have to give your professional opinion, say, okay, well, this offer looks really good. This is $20,000 higher. This one's lower, and this one's really low. So, you know, maybe you say, not at that offer. We're not going to offer you anything. Hey, Billy, you got a good offer. We're only going to give you 1%. And Joanne, oh, your offer's great. Well, you want it, whatever? You can have it with that offer. We like that. The problem's going to arise. Here's the problem, right? Everybody's got amnesia, okay? If you go back 16, 17 years ago, when it was a buyer's market, and we used to pay buyer's agents 3.5% and 4% because you couldn't even get a body through the door, you're limiting the seller of making it's bonuses or incentives for people to show their house.
Gotcha.
Okay? Because this isn't going to stay like this forever. So what happens if someone has the bank's breathing down their neck, they want to offer a $10,000 bonus or a 5% co-op? Guess what? You can't do that anymore. It's illegal. Okay? So that's restricting that seller from making their house look more attractive. And that is, to me, there's two things. That bothers me, number one. And number two, the FHA, the VA, the 3% down conventional buyer who doesn't have the money to pay concessions with that person doesn't offer any compensation, they're going to be limited and they need the most support and the most help. So I think that's the two things that my only concerns with how the process is down the road.
It's a very valid. What's interesting to me too, I hear when I do closings and I disperse the checks, and the listing agent got 3.5%, and the buyer agent got 1.5%, and the buyer agent actually will say, "What the hell? How am I only getting paid 1.5%?" Like they had no idea what the split. That's going to end. That aspect's going to end.
I think the gap gets bigger.
They're decoupled, right?
Right, now they're decoupled, right? So, talk about, you're saying decouple and it's going to get bigger. What do you mean it's going to get bigger?
So, again, the consumer is not, as in tune as we are in this practice. And I get, there's great real estate agents and there's real estate agents who aren't super ethical.
It's the 80-20 rule in every industry.
Correct, right? So I could see someone going in and say, "Hey, what's your commission? 6%. Oh, great. That sounds normal. Well, guess what? They're going to take all 6. Okay? Then what happens? Then the buyer brings their client through and they have a buyer's agency contract and they put a deal through and like, "Oh, we're not paying compensation." So the buyer gets paid by the buyer's agent gets paid by the buyer 2.5%. So the consumer just paid 8.5%.
You see that happening?
I've already seen it.
No kidding.
I've already seen it. Wow. So the commission wasn't 6%. It was 8% with a 0 co-op.
How about that?
Okay.
That's amazing. That's incredible. How's that helping the consumers?
It's not. It's not.
And that's just playing by the rules that are laid out now.
There's no cap on what you can charge somebody. There's nothing. Every commission is negotiable.
And it's based on your value proposition.
Correct. So if you have somebody who isn't the most ethical person in the world and is really strong in their approach and does a nice job, they can get 10%. I mean, commercial real estate used to be 10%, right?
Still is. In
a lot of spots.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of crazy situations. But because if the realtor doesn't explain the current state of how everything works, there's going to be a lot of 4, 5, and 6 on that listing side commission.
So here you go. What are the 3 questions does a buyer ask to interview their buyer agent before they choose the one that they want to go with? What are the 3 questions? Now you're the buyer. What are the 3 questions, 3 main questions that you need to ask as a buyer to ask your realtor to see if they're the right person for you?
Do you have another job? I think that's a great question.
That's
first thing.
That just hit me. I got to be honest with you. I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. Do you have another job? Yeah, I'm a fireman. It's not. Why want to full?
And nothing against firemen at all.
But this is no joke. This is the biggest purchase of your lifetime. You want to be there for support. I would think the other thing that I would say, do you have structure where if you're jammed up, that someone can help me? Yes. Like that team concept is great. Like if someone, sometimes you're at closings all day, you have to be at a house. Someone from my team will help you out and get there. Do you have support? All right. And I think, the third thing is that I would probably say, experience is one thing. Do you have anybody, like if you get a brand new agent, I'm always there in buyer consults, always. Because I want them to know that I'm behind this and I'll stand behind or help, I'm there. So how much experience do you have? And if you don't, can you lead on your team leader? Can you lean on them?
Do you have access to?
And that's why I go to all my new buyers agents, either myself or Jeff, who's been with me 23 years, will be in those consults to make sure, exchange cell numbers. Hey, you need me? And we'll say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Let's start a text thread. So I'm on the thread. I know what's going on. If I see something I need to jump on a thread, boom, I'll say it. If I don't, I'm still reading them, but I'll jump in and help you out.
So the first question is, are you committed 100% to the industry?
Correct.
And are you distracted by another position, another job outside?
I think it's a huge question.
The second one, do you have backup resources? If you're unavailable, God forbid something happens health-wise or a family member or go on vacation, that who do you have to be my go-to when you're not there? And number 3, being the leadership aspect. Do I have access to your team leader?
Correct.
You know, somebody who's going to, you know, if the deal goes sideways and it's not your vanilla cut deal, that you have somebody that's going to put me back on track.
And I think people underestimate that because a lot of times you need to strategize when you're writing offers now. It's not like just like write it up. There's a lot of thought and strategy to A, make sure everybody's getting everything accomplished through the transaction. B, you don't leave too much on the table. And C, like some of these agents write offers, they just waive all their inspections, waive this, and you're doing your buyer a major injustice. We will not do that.
And that's a whole nother segment.
That's a whole nother segment.
That's
right?
a whole nother segment. You just brought up something very major.
Bee's nest
that
that
on
all
our
this-
side of it,
Listen,
let me tell you, we see the
every
ramifications
attorney
of
out
that.
there is going to be licking their
Oh,
chops
you
in a
don't
couple
think
years.
in the next couple of years that's
Yeah.
you know it. 3 questions that you're a buyer and that you're going to ask your buyer agent, you know, to interview them. What are your 3?
Sure. I appreciate certainly what Mark has said.
Sure.
I think a couple of additional, it's important that a person be committed to the industry, but even more so, I would want to know how committed are you to me and my needs specifically. I just want to know that there aren't any distractions, whether it's outside of the industry distractions or, you know, too many things on your plate distractions or just non-commitment to understanding what my needs and wants are and getting me to the finish line. The other thing that I would always ask is, because it's always benefited me in all aspects of my professional career, can I have some references? Because sometimes the person sitting at your kitchen table can sell themselves like gold, but it's what you hear from other people, right?
on social media.
Yeah, it's what you hear.
Everybody's a billion. Everybody does $100 million in business on social media.
Getting feedback from other consumers who have worked with that professional can be very, very telling, and really help you understand if it's a fit. And that would be sort of my last thing, where I would go back to what I said before about how important trustworthiness, reputation, relationship are. When you select a professional to work with, it should be somebody that you feel comfortable with, that maybe is aligned personality-wise, just like you would select a physician or an attorney or maybe an accountant that you feel sort of speaks your language and, you know, gives you information in ways that you can understand it, communicates well. Same thing, you want to apply that same logic to a real estate professional. It is not a door opener. It is an absolute professional, and if you choose the right one, you've just built your muscle 10 times over to be able to prepare an offer, negotiate a contract, and get to the finish line in real estate.
So let's recap. The first one is dedication to my personal needs, being there, available, so that you can digest what I want and go get what I want and negotiate that item. Number 2, personal references. Who are you going to put out there? Or professional references, actually. You know, it can be an attorney, mortgage company.
Or personal references. I want to hear from other clients you've worked with.
There you go. Okay. That's a really good point. And the last point was? Go ahead.
Going back to, am I choosing someone who's aligned with my personality?
Gotcha.
With the way that I want to receive information.
Gotcha. Okay, because I was aligning to the first part, but that's cool. I got you. That personal connection is very important. It is. But there's some people that will call, they're in front of this, I've done this. And I buy real estate. I'm in front of this house, I need to go inside and see it right now. Who do you got? That's over with, right?
Done.
That's not happening.
It can, but hey, I'm going to DocuSign our buyer's agency agreement exclusive to this house.
And
I don't
that
want to
goes
sign
your-
that.
Then it goes to your point to say, I didn't read that. I didn't know I'm paying you 3% or 4%.
Whatever, but if you want to see the house, that's the rules. And we're not going to jeopardize our license not following the rules. And I think the one thing too that, because some of the agents are so worried about this, you're going to really cut down on wasted time.
That's a great point.
Okay? Your close ratio is going to be higher. You're asking better questions. You're dealing with people who are serious about making decisions. The tire kickers, boom. So you might say, like, and excuse my language here, most realtors have what I call the mentality is they'll take any lead, take them out, rush them out.
Can we edit that part?
Beep, right? So they'll go out there, I got to leave, I went out there, right? Okay, you can't do that anymore because you waste, if you look over your year, how much time you wasted, you want to throw up, right? You're asking better questions, you know who's motivated, you have everything written down. When you take that time in the beginning, you figure everything out real quick. Sure.
You know, it's funny, there's a really good realtor that I've worked with, and I've asked a couple questions about how do you know when a buyer is serious about what they're doing? And he says, let's say it's a cash buyer. The first thing he asks for is proof of funds. Mm-hmm. That clarifies the whole scenario for him. And he has lived by that for 18 years. And it seems to work. Do you have a mortgage approval? That tells me how committed.
How many times over the years, yeah, I'm a cash buyer. Okay, great. Can you give us proof of funds? I don't want to show it to you yet. Well, that's a problem. It's a red flag.
That's a red flag.
Because you're a cash buyer, you're like, okay, here you go. And you're like, oh, yeah, you're for real.
Yep, let's go.
Let's go.
You know, sign a buyer agency agreement. Let's move forward.
And asking those between the eyes questions too. There's this whole other thing that we've talked about quite a bit, the level of fraud that happens in our industry.
Oh,
being capable of asking the tough questions up front will flush out those people too.
You mean people lie to you in this business? Jeez and crackers.
I never had that experience.
Believe it happens.
I never got fake wire instructions.
And this is a great point too, because we always live by the philosophy, buyers are liars, because no one ever told you the truth because you didn't do as much vetting and spend as much time. The more time you spend, the more questions you ask, the less nonsense you're going to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I'm looking at this whole thing as a giant opportunity for our company to succeed at a much higher level. I mean, I think our growth is going to be 25, 30% in the next couple of years each year because the level of training, the leadership, all the things that you talked about that you do, that I do, we're going to do amazing in this changing times. Amazing. I can't wait.
So today is August 5th, and this is probably not going to get aired until after this happens, but you're actually doing an event, a big one. Tomorrow, right? August 6th at branches in Long Branch, New Jersey. How many agents are coming?
200? Yeah, 200 agents.
About 200 agents.
Sold tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Sold tickets. You got
sold tickets.
Yeah, you have to.
Yes.
And
it's impressive.
That is.
And ClosePoint's a sponsor.
Yes.
We're excited about always doing the sponsorship for not just your teams, but there's 3 other team leaders.
And there's other agents coming from other companies too, because they want to absorb as much as they can. I think the one thing that's going to be interesting tomorrow, other people come, is from other brokerages. They're not going to be as organized as we are. And hey, this is the forms we use. We're all done. We're ready. It's business as usual. We're out selling houses.
It's the resources coming out of that event tomorrow are insane, and just a testament back to what we said before, that this model and the way that we leverage one another is just beyond. I mean, it's incredible.
How great is Joe Oz?
Oh, incredible.
Like,
incredible.
to share everything. He's like, hey, you guys can have one. Just change my logo. Like, I mean, how many hours to prepare all that stuff?
Absolutely.
And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, you just change my logo. You can have all my stuff. That's where, like, we're giant. The team just gets bigger and bigger because they all share with us. It's not, we're not in competition. Who's going to be, they all want us to do great.
We all win.
That's huge.
And something else too that speaks to this is, it's a small, subtle point, but most people aren't catching on that all of these forms that EXP has proactively taken the lead on, all of this consumer-friendly information, the way it's being presented, they have not copyrighted any of those forms intentionally.
Wow.
They want to share them with the industry. They want to help the agents who are scared and worried and uneducated and without leadership right now. That's amazing, and I think that speaks to how we're being led.
Correct.
And how we want to lead. Going back to what you asked earlier.
You know, and I had a kind of aha breakthrough moment when they came with their new forms, when I read on Inman that the consumer watchdog group that's looking over all this loves EXP's forms. Like, that's the poster child of what they want moving forward. Okay.
That's incredible.
And you know, we don't want to. They don't want to train us and then they want to do it right out of the gate. So we might, you know, rustle some feathers along the way, but this is the right way to do it.
And if we're going to help the consumer, let's help the consumer.
100%.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here today. I think it was incredibly enlightening for me to hear your perspectives, but you're also collaborating with each other to develop a product that you can deliver not to just your agents, but to your consumers, your customers. And it also sounds like you're building something where you're right about an attorney or an accountant providing services. It's a long-term relationship, and it's not transactionally based, which is a lot of agents work on a transaction basis and not a continual relationship of professional advice on dealing with real estate, not just from your primary house, but investments as well. And we'll get into that at another time, but I want to thank you for your time, for being here. You guys did an amazing job, and I'm enlightened and very hopeful for what is to come because of you guys, people like you that are providing the insight to not just your own agents, but to everybody else. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Deanna.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And
I'll see you tomorrow.
see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to not just learning what you're delivering to the agents that are there, but selfishly, how I can better our company to service the agents and make us prepared for the questions of how a commission versus a concession, repair credits and whatnot are going to impact our closing process. So you guys are definitely leaders that, it's amazing how you're disseminating information. And again, thank you for being here, and look forward to doing another one. And we'll see what the results are. And
It's going to be great.
I agree.
Thanks for having me.
No, this
Thanks,
is
Chris.
incredibly. Thank you, Mark.
I'll see you at dinner.
See you at dinner.